Hello, class, and welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about logos, ethos, and pathos, and other rhetorical appeals that you will see pop up in speeches and writing. So let's start with logos. Logos is linked to our word logic. This appeal usually has to do with facts, figures, or verifiable data that just makes sense. A lot of times when people think logos, they think numbers and statistics, and yes, that is definitely part of it. But anything that is a verifiable fact can be logos. So we have this example here on the right side of the screen. This is an anti-smoking ad, and we can see all of the issues that smoking could potentially cause. And these just sort of pieces of data help establish the message in this image. Okay, let's go to ethos. Ethos is linked to our word ethics. This appeal has to do with credibility or trust. Usually an author appeals to a higher authority or an expert. Ethos can also be an appeal to a moral code. This is something that we see a lot in advertisement, right? Obviously, if you want to sell soccer cleats, then you're going to use a famous soccer player. This is, something that we see in a lot of essays. If a student is not an expert in a particular topic, one of the things that they can do to build ethos in their essay is to quote experts in that particular topic. So we see that a lot in academic writing. And then pathos is the third of the three main rhetorical appeals. Pathos is linked to emotions, and it's going to be the root in words like sympathy, empathy, and apathy. So anytime a writer tries to make you feel something, that is going to be a use of pathos. So it can be a positive emotion or even a negative emotion. It's still all pathos. So we can see in this example on the right side of the screen, the words "only cowards abuse animals," and then we see this cute little puppy. Anytime there's a puppy or a kitten, this is probably a use of pathos, because when we see puppies or kittens or even babies, we immediately have that, tug on the heartstrings, and we think, oh, look how cute that is. So that's a great use of pathos, but also the use of the word cowards in here is an example of pathos. When somebody reads that, they immediately think, well, I don't want to be a coward, and sort of the connection between, being a coward and abusing animals also definitely elicits a lot of strong emotions. So I have a couple of advertisements that we're going to look at here. And I'm just going to kind of point out some examples of ethos, pathos, and logos that I see in this. So this first one is an advertisement for the WWF, which of course is the World Wildlife Federation. And the words are kind of cut in half down at the bottom, but they say "before it's too late." And this is obviously a very impactful advertisement. We have trees that are shaped like lungs. And so obviously we can see that there's a message of the dangers of deforestation here, and how deforestation and, obviously our breathing is connected. So we immediately experience pathos when we see this, right? Because you see this dead area surrounded by green, and that elicits an emotional response. There's also ethos involved in this because of, the inclusion of the WWF symbol here. It makes us realize that, this is a group that sort of has the authority to speak on an issue like this. And even though there's, very little words on this advertisement, we still see an example of logos. There's a certain percentage or amount of, the trees / lungs that are removed, and so we can, we sort of get the idea that yes, a very large percentage of it's gone, but maybe it's not too late. Okay, obviously, the first thing that we're going to experience here is pathos. This is a very sad image. It says, if you don't pick it up, they will. There's, a picture of a bird that is deceased. And so, anytime you see something dead, there's going to be an emotional response. We also get ethos with the Endangered Wildlife Trust emblem in the corner. So obviously this is a group that sort of has the credibility or the authority to speak on this issue. And we see logos here too with just the sheer number of pieces of plastic and the proportion of the bird's carcass that it takes up. Okay, here is one more example. So this is an interesting sign. It's one of those things that you drive past and it flashes the speed that you're going versus the speed limit. But instead of just saying this is your speed, it says days in a hospital bed. Now, obviously, there's not a direct correlation between how fast you're going and how many days you would spend in a hospital bed, but there is some correlation between, the speed that somebody is driving when they get in a car accident and the likelihood of an injury. So this is a little bit of false logos, but it definitely works. In making people think, and it also works as pathos because it elicits a emotional reaction. Nobody wants to get in a car accident. Obviously, nobody wants to spend time in the hospital. So that stirring up of fear is a good example of pathos. And then obviously, there's ethos involved in this image. In the bottom right hand corner of this sign, it says Elm Grove Police, and obviously the police have the authority to speak on something like speed limits, and these people are going 21 miles over the speed limit, which is way too fast. Okay, so let's talk about some other rhetorical appeals that you should just be familiar with. Any of these appeals that we talk about today can be used in your rhetorical analysis, but these are just a drop in the bucket of the number of rhetorical appeals. There are really a lot of them, so this is just kind of like the starter pack. If you see something in your speech as you're analyzing it, and you think, I wonder if that's rhetorical appeal, feel free to shoot me an email and ask about it, or see if you can find some more information about it online. Okay, so the first one that I want to talk about is allusion. Allusion is a reference to an event, place, or person. And usually it's an event, place, or person that has either historical, social, literary, or historical significance. So, for example, you might say something like, I can't get change that quickly. I'm not Superman. And you're referring to the writer's referring to something that we all kind of know about. And it allows the writer to make a point without elaborating in great detail. By using this allusion, they're able to explain their point. In addition to that, allusions oftentimes work kind of like an inside joke. When an author or a speaker uses an allusion and the reader or listener understands it, there's sort of a connection there. And this works well for rhetorical purposes, because when a connection is made between a speaker and a listener, or a writer and a reader, all of a sudden the person reading or listening is more likely to accept the other things that that person has to say. An analogy explains one thing in terms of another to sort of highlight the ways in which they are alike. So, for example, if you were to say he's as flaky as a snowstorm, your listener or your reader would understand that it's not just that this person is a little bit flaky. He's, significantly flaky, because snowstorms don't just have one, or two or a few snowflakes. They have a lot of snowflakes. So once again, you have explained something kind of complex by only using a simple phrase. An antithesis is when a writer or a speaker makes a connection between two things that are usually pretty different. So, for example, when Neil Armstrong said, "That's one small step for mankind, for man, one giant leap for mankind," he's comparing things that are different, small step and giant leap, as well as one man and mankind. But by putting them together, he is creating this idea that even though these things are opposite, they actually belong together. A hyperbole is an exaggeration or an extreme exaggeration. Like if somebody says, "Hey, do you know how to do this?" and you say, "I've done this 1,000 times," that's probably an exaggeration, but it obviously indicates to your listener that you're very familiar with the task and you don't need to have an explanation or set of instructions. A metaphor is a type of implied comparison between two things that are actually not similar. So, for example, if I were to say, your eyes are the window of your soul, right? Your physical eyes and window and your soul are all three disconnected things. But by saying them together, you get the implied meaning that you can see someone's emotional state by looking into their expressive eyes. Okay, parallelism uses words or phrases with similar structure. If you were to say like father, like son, this is an example of parallelism. So this technique creates symmetry and balance in your writing. It also works very well in speeches. So in some of the speeches that you look at, you may come across this rhetorical appeal. And then understatement is a statement that makes an idea less important than it really is. So, for example, saying the hurricane disrupted traffic a little would definitely be an understatement, because hurricanes obviously cause millions of dollars in damage and can lead to huge disruptions or even injuries or fatalities. Once again, when you use an understatement, it's kind of like an inside joke, and so your reader or listener feels connected to you and they're more likely to accept the other things that you say. Okay, if you have any questions about rhetorical appeals, feel free to reach out to me. But if not, these are great rhetorical appeals to get you started on your rhetorical analysis.